Someone asked me yesterday, so what's the elevator pitch for this podcast? I'm like, well, we'll find out.
Yeah, how many floors do we go?
We're gonna figure that out over the next however long we talk.
That sounds like what an average pastor would do.
Yeah,
we'll just figure it out.
That's what we're gonna do on this.
I'm actually feeling less average even as the conversation goes.
The bar keeps getting lower.
It's gonna be the below average pastor's podcast.
Right away on episode 1, we have to change the
name. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome, friends, to our first ever Average Pastor podcast. I'm Mark Arant, and I'm here with Jeff Dodge and Jake Each. So I was thinking, they do Seinfeld does a comedians in cars having coffee.
Yeah.
And what is this? Pastors on podcasts.
Eating pastries. You need to bring some donuts in here so we could... Pastors on a podcast eating pastries. I'd go for that.
Actually, we're in a kid's Sunday school room, so that has to...
I was like, what this podcast needs is a nice bear claw. Like, dude, this
So next time, let's... Jake,
can we put a suggestion box for the three of us?
Jake, you're in charge of pastries next week. You know what? That's the new name of this podcast. Pastors on podcast eating
with
pastries.
Pastries.
Yeah. So that's basically. Did we just give the elevator pitch? I think we just did it. I think we figured it out
with no more clarity of what it is about.
And half the audience has already turned it off.
So I'm thinking this podcast reminds me of the Tri-County Times paper. And it's a newspaper no one's ever heard of because it was only for like 3 small counties in the small town Iowa where my grandparents lived. And, I'd go home and I'd see the Tri-County Times I was like, I wonder what's in here, because it's all small town news. Yeah. And I saw our names in there like Linda Arant, maiden name Griffith. She had her kids and, here and Marge Griffith's grandkids. And so our names were in there. And I'm like, this is news that nobody's reading. I feel like that's kind of this podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
What it reminded me of is I think our heart is we are local pastors, right? We're not trying to pastor the world. We're not trying to solve everyone's problems. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was because we get together. We used to get together weekly. Now it's monthly, but we get together and we reread stuff that we've written. That's always our deadline. We have a once a month deadline for something that we've written. And so we just do those readings and we talk about it and process. And
what was the group like C.S. Lewis and what was their...
The Inklings?
Yeah, I was telling Johnny about our group and she's like, you guys should be the Tinklings.
That's us. That's us. The Tinklings right here.
That's it.
Just we are small potatoes. We're talking about...
For a moment, I thought you were going to say the Inklings. We were at that same level. You immediately just ripped us down
to reality.
To reality.
It's the below average version of that.
Yeah. Way below that.
Way below.
Well, I was thinking about how when we get together, we do those readings. I walk away so encouraged by the things you guys are writing and thinking about. And I've had this problem with social media where I just see it it's just it's toxic. It's a dumpster fire. And I've all these descriptives and I got off, Twitter in like 2016 or 17, I think. It was just not doing great things for me. And so since then, I've just kind of been off of social media. I don't post anything. But then I was thinking about it it's a medium to use. And I thought with a podcast, everyone's got a podcast now. But I thought, how could we share this? Invite people into what are the conversations we're having and some of the things that you guys are writing and thinking about would be a real encouragement to the church and even our stewardship as pastors to faithfully represent Christ, be ambassadors. So I thought that this could be a great way to do that. We'll do this for as long as it's
Fun.
Yeah.
And it's really just friends on mission. That's what we're doing, is just the friendships that we experience. And we have connections with other brothers that aren't as local, that we will probably have on here at different times. But we're all pretty local here in Central Iowa, and we're speaking to our congregations, our people. But if it's a benefit to other people, but it's kind of a tri-county times probably of people that are connected to us in some way that would be interested in things we're thinking about and processing. So that's probably what this is going to turn out to be. The other thing is there's some different quotes. I actually came across it first from something Johnny wrote. She quoted Flannery O'Connor, where it's something like, "I don't know what I think until I read what I said."
Oh, yeah.
It's been attributed to Flannery O'Connor. Different people have said it in different ways. So, one person said, not writing a book is harder than writing a book, because it's in writing the book that you figure out what you think.
Oh, yeah.
And so Jake, you wrote a book. We'll talk about that in the next podcast. Jeff has written books. I wrote this book, The Advantage of Average. And what I want to do on this episode is process together this concept of average. So what is the advantage of average? Why is that a cultural kind of distinctive that marks what we're going for? Why is that a gold standard? That seems, what do you live in a box, you lack ambition. There's a lot of negative connotations, but what is the advantage of average? And just use this episode to process that. We're calling it the Average Pastor Podcast. So when I say that, there's a scripture that kind of unlocked some things for me in Luke, or in Matthew chapter 11 verse 25. And this is the Message translation. I love how Eugene Peterson says this, paraphrases the words of Jesus, where he says, "Thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You've concealed your ways from sophisticates and know-it-alls, but spelled them out clearly to ordinary people. Yes, Father, that's the way you like to work." And even in Acts 4, after Peter and John preached, it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that these were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished and took note that these men had been with Jesus. So that's where it comes from. This idea of, why do ordinary people seem to have an advantage when it comes to knowing Jesus and representing him? So that's kind of what we're going for in this, is just, hey, we're just ordinary guys. We're not trying to be a big deal. We're not out here trying to, win crowds and be celebrities, but just faithful, humble pastors and people. So let's talk about why that's an advantage. And when you hear the advantage of average, what do you think about?
What's the advantage of it?
Yeah.
Right now we're preaching through 2 Corinthians, and Paul's spending a lot of time in that letter defending his credibility or his apostleship compared to what he calls super apostles. And in Corinth, a culture that valued status and wealth and power and influence, and Paul comes along as a suffering evangelist here, where you can understand how people in that culture would look at him like, I don't know if I want to follow you. Like, I don't know if I want your life. And in defense of his ministry, there's a part where in chapter 4, where he says, we have this treasure in jars of clay. Whereas, a jar of clay is like first century Tupperware. It's like, I know I'm not impressive. And some of it's like, and that's the point, because we have this so that it's clear that the surpassing power of God is not us, it's God. Like, it's evidence that God's doing this. Now, you hear, if somebody calls you a jar of clay, that could feel very insulting. But Paul embraces it, because he's saying, but it's really clear. Like, nobody's going to look at us and be like, wow, look what you're doing. Paul's saying, people look at me, and what's clear is God's doing something through me. And I think we live in a similar culture where people very, very much value prestige and power and influence. So I think we've all maybe caught ourselves thinking if that person became a Christian, that what they could do, right? If Taylor Swift like gave her heart to Jesus, or LeBron James, or whoever it's like, wow, what they, and it's like God never thinks that way. He's not like, what could I do if that person became on my team? And we just value the wrong things. But I think not only is there this pressure to not be jars of clay, but to be impressive, it's a crushing pressure. Like there's some freedom in just like, I don't have to impress everybody. I don't have to like keep up and these projections of I have it all together. And so I think there's a lot of the advantages, the freedom in knowing like it's not what's on the outside, but it's the treasure that God put inside that has the value.
Wow. Jake, you were the one that kind of made its way into the book. I didn't give you credit for it, but you said, what would God be most glorified by? If he's on a team with some superstars, and he wins. Jordan, LeBron, all these legendary players, and Jesus, and they win the game. Well, he had Jordan and LeBron, but if he's, on a team with a bunch of fifth graders.
Yeah. Give me that fisherman, give me that tax collector, give me that zealot, and I'll change the world.
Yep. Yeah.
That's actually what I was thinking when you were asking the question. Is the three of us have talked a lot about just the way that the Gospel of John ends. You're waiting for this post-resurrection, about to be ascended Lord to drop some big truth bomb, like at the end of Matthew, the Great Commission, those kind of things. But the Gospel of John ends with the disciples that are supposed to change the world, are like, I think I'm going to go fish. Me too. I'll go with like the most there they are, and what does Jesus do when he encounters? He doesn't rebuke them, doesn't try to fire them back up, whatever.
Let's have
Cooks
breakfast.
them. Yeah, that's exactly. Come and have breakfast is the next words they hear from him, and they come over. There's the sizzling,
probably some pastries.
And a bear claw. Dude, I had never seen that in John 21.
It's the Greek.
It's Jake's revised version.
Totally. But I don't know. I go back to that image so much because Jesus was not thrown off by their averageness, and in fact entered into it in order to say, hey, things like friendship, things like me just sitting with you over a breakfast with hot sizzling fish on this lake. Yeah, this is actually the way I'm going to change the world. And so not only should we be comfortable with the reason that there's an advantage of average is Jesus is the one that inspires that. You know what I'm saying?
And I think in Matthew, you get the Great Commission, like go into all the nations. But in John, you get like, hey, feed my sheep.
Yeah.
And really that is the Great Commission getting played out
totally.
in a
they're not
focused.
in like some weird juxtaposition. Those actually are going to accomplish the very same things.
Yeah.
And we just have to settle back into God's means, Jesus' means of doing that.
Yeah.
I was thinking of what kind of sparks this is I see a big problem in the world.
Yeah. Why did you what drove you to write that?
Well, I think a lot of it was looking around at young people and their ambition, their desire to ascend this hill or this ladder of greatness, and to want, and social media has poured gas on this passion that we have to be great, to want to be a big deal.
Right. Well, all of us remember like pre-internet, like the introduction to social media is not only do you can have a web page all about you, like you can. This is where people come.
It's YouTube. It's not the tube. It's YouTube.
Yeah, everybody, and you can get likes and followers, and again, we can talk about benefits of social media, but there's undeniable.
Yeah. So it seems
hardships.
It seems to have poured gasoline on this already burning fire of vainglory and pride, and that's
just like you wouldn't tell a recovering alcoholic to go, hang out at a bar. You wouldn't like, hey, if you struggle with if you're a human being that has a self-centeredness bent, Like social media is the bar for the alcoholic. I mean, it's
Right. And we all live there.
Yeah.
But we all live in the bar.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so
Well, that's what I was going to say too, that lest we think that it was social media that actually caused this. I mean, Genesis 3, the very first temptation that took mankind into this whole pathway was you can be like God. So that aspiration to be great has been in our bloodstream.
Yeah,
since,
like,
you know what I mean?
like you said, it didn't. It just poured gas
Yes.
on it.
Yeah, totally. It was, but this pressure then to be amazing. Now it's quantifiable. I can see how great you are just by looking you up on social media. And how do you look in your pictures? How many likes do you have? How many followers? It's quantifiable how amazing you are.
Yeah, even publishers that want to publish a book are going to ask, how many followers do you have?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Dude,
the,
as it turns out, I was asked that question. And I was like, I actually have no social media presence on anything, you know, and they're like, wow, how are we going to work with this guy?
well, there's already this, they used to call it vainglory. That's the old Puritan way of talking about our desire, our lust to be known, to be seen. And I think why I wrote this is because I see this, first of all, in my own heart, but then as I look at, myself in my early 30s planting a church, and now I see this emerging generation of church planners, and this applies certainly to anyone, and I don't really apply it specifically to church planners in the book, but that's kind of where I was thinking about
Because it's our
my
world,
own,
pastors and seeing other pastors.
my own reflection on what is the disadvantage of amazing. That's the other way to talk about this book.
Right.
The disadvantage of amazing, what I see is people using each other, people seeing it as life's kind of like a chessboard, and you just got to outsmart people. And the disadvantage of amazing, if we were all celebrities, we might if we weren't just like some friends, if we were celebrities, but we're doing this podcast to be a big deal. The disadvantage of that would be we're guys that are useful to each other. Friendship is really an alliance, and it's like commodifying friendship. Like we're friends to the extent that we help each other build our platforms. But really, since that's not our goal. Our goal is a different goal. It's to know Christ.
That would require that we first have a platform.
Yeah.
So there's the advantage we bring into the table.
Yeah. What I really appreciated about your book, though, and it's a needed voice in our world right now, is the reaction against it, especially to ambitious people, would be like, you're telling me just not to try. You're telling me it's okay to be lazy or
right.
And that's not what you're saying.
No.
What I loved about it is it's like, no, actually being average is the path to success. We're all fans of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, that example of the way we're going to defeat,
Sauron.
it's like through power, and it's the average hobbits that, ultimately succeed. And it's interesting. It's like, because they're not drawn to, they have this resistance against the power. Well, I feel the same way in your book. You're saying, hey, actually the way to be successful in life and successful as ministry is not to be drawn into the power.
Yeah, because like the hobbits, we are compelled by the mission. We are extremely compelled by accomplishing the mission. You know what I mean? Like, so to your point of, does this make us less ambitious for Christ and for that calling? No, it does, not at all. But our role in it, we're okay with that being diminished. We're okay with the mission going forward and ourselves, kind of getting written out of the script at some point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Appropriately.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeff, I want to read this quote from Lord of the Rings. Could you just tell us real quick who are the hobbits? What is the Shire? Well, just a quick for those that have never heard of or aren't aware of. They don't speak Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of noble characters and races and creatures in Lord of the Rings, like the Tolkien world that he had created. But the hobbits are some of the most unremarkable. They're smaller. They're called halflings because they're very small and they just love the quiet life and pastures and gardens. And so if you were scanning the world to look for that group of people that could possibly topple the superpower that has now, come in to take over the whole Tolkien universe, you wouldn't look to the halflings. You know what I mean? And so that's the beautiful kind of twist in the whole thing, is that all the other good, powerful, noble races end up kind of coming in to just support and strengthen these feeble little halflings that are going to end up, winning the day. So it's pretty remarkable.
I love the Lord of the Rings. I'm close to wearing a robe to go see dress like an elf to watch this movie. Like, I love it. I'm not as good with the names. Who is the character from Gondor that, in their council, they were having a debate what to do with this ring. And he's like, let's use its power to destroy
Boromir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boromir,
So there is this strategy of like the way to defeat bad powers with good power, or even just using power.
Right.
And I wonder if church planting or just in life, it's like, hey, if we want to be a difference, we have to be more influential. We have to show that we have, style and charisma and power and wealth, and that's how we're going to defeat it. And I think your book's saying, no, let's take this path.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jeff, this was, you texted me this after you reread the book, The Hobbit, and you said, hey, Mark, just assure me that these will be your last words to me. This will be our last conversation before I step into heaven. Mm-hmm. And here's the quote. This is the last lines of The Hobbit. So this is the wizard Gandalf speaking to the Hobbit Bilbo at the end of their great quest. You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you. But you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world after all. Thank goodness, said Bilbo, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar.
I just love that so much.
So explain that.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're asking me that as I'm, tomorrow going to head up to look at my little burial plot in Orchard, Iowa, where I got one of my Amish friends to plant a Baroque on my plot because I just wanted a tree that I love planted right on top of where I'm going to be buried. Anyway, because, it's the least remarkable place maybe on planet Earth. But just that whole thing that, man, if we could die with that aspiration of just, again, seeing ourselves written off the script, we did what we were called to do, and then the mission carried on, and it was almost like not a heroic ending at all, but like a ... just kind of fades away. You know what I mean? That we just give way to the greater mission. And because if we really embraced that, it would spill back into how I live my life today. If that's, as opposed to if my idea is I want to end my life having made my mark in the world, having, left a legacy or for my children, whatever. Well, that too is going to spill back in how I make decisions today. You know what I mean? So that's what I love about that ending.
He's reassured by the fact that he's a little fellow in a wide world. Like, what a relief that I'm not a big deal.
Yeah. What was I'm putting you on the spot. You read a review of the Lord of the Rings one time. It's about do you remember what that?
Yeah. So what it was during COVID, and I was looking at just different stuff to read, and I came across this description of the Lord of the Rings, and let's see if I can. Yeah, it says this person was kind of giving a reading list, like, hey, you should read Lord of the Rings, and here's the description of it. It said something about the Fellowship of the Ring that gave me a real sense of hope and satisfaction. Was the idea that in the face of even the most insurmountable obstacles, all you have to focus on is the next step. And filling each little step with warmth, togetherness, and good meals is as integral to the mission as the goal itself. In this case, destroying the One Ring in the fires of Mordor. Come for the gripping, high-stakes fantasy adventure. Stay for the best camping trip in literary history.
I love it because I think in ministry or life, there's this, like, what are we going to do? What hills are we going to climb and accomplish? But the strength of ministry long-term is a lot of campfires, a lot of shared meals, a lot of just relational journeying together. Because even when you look at Christianity itself, it's this paradox of like when Christ came, he got like 12 guys that hung out a lot. You know, they ministered to people. And that's what's boomed to the ends of the earth.
Yeah. I think here's what's cool too is the reason I love this little circle of friends right here. And we're not alone, right? It's just us three happen to be at this table right now. But Jake, I watched a video of you as you were coaching up the people of Veritas Cedar Rapids about you were going into a big campaign to do some renovations, and it was, you know, most pastors would try to be as inspirational. And from the moment I started watching the little video, I zeroed in on the T-shirt you were wearing. And for this video, can you remember what I'm talking about? And it was the one with, you don't even know what you were wearing. That's how intentional you were. It was like a Marvel set of characters, and Jesus was in the middle. And he was like, and that's how
That's how I saved the world.
Yeah.
So they're all sitting listening to.
And I just started laughing because I'm like, Veritas Cedar Rapids, you are so blessed to have a dude that just took the top T-shirt off his stack.
Okay, so this is a story.
I probably didn't even know we were filming a video that day. Like,
what I'm saying is that's what I want. That's who I want in my circle of people. Anyway,
funny Jake story. We
it's this
so
getting a theme here.
recruiting you to come to Cedar Rapids. You're down in Phoenix, Arizona, in just a wealthy suburb, enjoying the good life, have a pool and enjoying your home, and just asking you, hey, what would you think of coming to Cedar Rapids? And, you know, you're from Iowa. That was our only hope is, but one of the things you said is like, you said, well, Marcy and I, we're more like Walmart people, you know, it's not, we don't, I don't even know if you know what Von Mar is or whatever, but you think Target is a little too.
It's a little uppity.
Too
trendy.
You know? We're like Walmart people, and I'm like, man, Cedar Rapids is your town, man. But I love that's something that, Jake, I admire about you is, you know, whenever we have a retreat, everyone's like, hey, let's get Jake. I mean, but even your own story of being in small town Iowa for years, just as a young pastor. And I feel like that really shaped you. And I talk to young guys in their 20s, even early 30s, and I tell your story, like, tell me about that time and how shaping that was for you. Because as I think about the advantage of average, especially for pastors, I mean, what could be more dangerous than a proud man at the helm of a church?
Yeah.
And how God he wants clay pots. And I just feel like you're one of the most gifted guys. I mean, we'll talk in another episode about the book you just wrote that I'm really excited about and talking about that. But I think your life was kind of forged in those years of serving in obscurity. And could you just speak to that?
Yeah, I would agree that it was really forming. I think when it comes to church planters today, one maybe litmus test is when you plant a church, there's an excitement, entrepreneurial, build my team, I'm going to go to this city, this university town. It's kind of a big deal. Like, it's exciting, and it should be exciting. That's a wonderful thing to do. The litmus test is, would you be excited to go to Osage, Iowa? Would you be? And if it's like, no, I think I'd rather just get a secular job than do that. I think the test is, are you excited about being a leader in an exciting place? Are you excited about serving Jesus?
Right.
And if you're not excited about serving Jesus anywhere, then maybe you shouldn't be serving Jesus anywhere. And even like when you look at, the Old Testament prophets, they got their assignment and then their location. And I think we turn it around where it's like, I want my location and then I'll figure out my assignment. And just like, if you love the Lord and you love teaching his word, where do you want me to go? Well, I'll do that. I'll serve you wherever. And I think that's the heart posture that we need. And there's nothing too sexy about serving Jesus in a small town, and it's super sweet.
Sorry.
You preached 50 out of 52 weeks for
Yeah,
7 years.
Yeah, I'd get my father-in-law to come up on vacation, so that gave me a week or something. Yeah, you get a lot of reps, and
I was just giving thanks to God. I think you were sleeping in the car yesterday as we were driving back from seeing a friend whose mother's been in an accident. But anyway, we were driving back, and I drove by the exit that would have taken me. So right after living in LA and having just a ball, going to seminary, working at a university out there, and then went from there to the most rural of rural in Iowa. Spent a few years, and as I was passing by the exit, I gave thanks to God because that was so formative for me to be literally thrust to the bottom, to the most obscure. And it wasn't just being obscure. I got the crap beat out of me. Like, it was a terrible experience. So it's
Tell
not
the
like
mud puddle story.
there's one night I'm just, it is the most soulishly debilitating place. And we stuck it out for a while. But anyway, I'm on my way to a meeting down at this little church that I was pastoring, and it's raining, and I'm walking down the road to get there. And one of the other leaders, who has this brand new big old Suburban, drives by, sees me walking on the road on my way to this church meeting, hits a puddle. It just splashes up and just covers me. And I remember I just stopped and just kind of looked down and just kind of,
Did they stop for you?
No, just kept going.
Wasn't that a metaphor of what was about to happen
It's an
in the meeting?
absolute metaphor of, I was about to get my, John the Baptist head on a plate. But I'm just saying, but now, I mean, obviously I wasn't laughing at that moment. It was difficult times, for sure. It was difficult times. I have thanked God for those moments so many times because God reminded me that, I didn't take you to LA and give you this opportunity of a lifetime for a while just to keep you on this rising. Oh, no, actually, let me do the next most important thing in your development and hold your head underwater for a while. And that if God was ever going to do anything different, it was going to be by his grace and not be because I somehow earned the next rung on some imaginary ladder.
So much of Christ's ministry was in small towns.
Dude, 100%. Yeah. Even the Sea of Galilee, that's actually a lake, is one of the most unremarkable places. You know what I mean? So even the place that he hovered around and had the most ministry success in was an unremarkable backwater place.
Yeah.
I think I talked to, other young pastors and and other fellow pastors about, giving young guys just what they need as a faithfulness test. Are you going to be faithful to do that? For me, the test was given me back in 2001. I was, leading Salt with being on staff with you, Jeff, and just having a blast doing ministry and leading worship, making albums and having a great time. And it was, I think you and Troy is like, hey, what about being the youth pastor here? What about being the first full-time youth pastor at Cornerstone? And man, that was a test and then Paul was going to be taking over Salt Company, Paul Sabino, and just, man, looking over, and my dear brother, Paul, just, he's a dynamic, pastor, preacher, and he took over Salt, and I, climbed down the ladder of ministry down to youth ministry, where I spent 4 years in ministry purgatory, atoning for past sins of my youth
and future sins.
Yeah. There in that ministry, I look at, man, that was an amazing season of ministry. Yeah. I mean, Miranda Ennis, now Robinson, baptizing her, seeing Samantha Lewis, now Kelly, Shane and Samantha here on staff at Veritas, and seeing her come to know Jesus. Yeah. And I was reading through old applications to a mission trip, and I saw her application from 15 years ago. I just became a Christian, haven't been baptized yet, but I want to look at, and now to see where her family is a mission.
It's a miracle
journey. It's a miracle. And so that season of ministry, I learned so much. And
And maybe everybody doesn't need that. Maybe God just saw the pride already ready to burst onto the scene in our souls. But I welcome it, right? Like maybe I needed being held down for longer but let's welcome that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's isn't it ongoing too? That God,
dude.
it's not like, oh, I learned that lesson. I'm good. I remember, our first year here in Iowa City, the church plant was going great. It was awesome. I mean, the thing was exploding. And I feel like I don't know, at a personal level, the church is growing, expanding. And personally, it was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Leaf and I were going through some really hard stuff. And I remember, calling a friend down south and like, hey, is there any way we could just come and just sit in the sun? And we did. We went down, and I feel like I remember sitting on the beach next to my wife, and I feel like God said to me, Mark, you think that you're here because, of your wife and maybe some of the struggles, and this is you. Yeah. You're the problem here, and I'm giving you a little time out. It's a nice time out. But I'm making you lie down in green pastures, and I'm making you sit down beside these quiet waters, and I'm, the question was, would you rather, if you have to choose, Mark, and you choose who's going to fail, would you rather see the church fail or your wife? Mm. And I remember just like, Lord, I am sorry. I think we had been married like 11 years at that time, 11, 12 years. And I remember thinking, this is the first time we've ever done something like this, and shame on me. But that was a season of God's discipline of me and just refocusing on what it's all about. And I still remember that week I was gone in February. It was like the biggest attendance, of our church. And here I'm, not there. And I think God needs to remind me of that. I think that's kind of the heart here in this book too, is how do we interact with success, and this idea of the turtle on the post, and how do you, it all kind of starts with that. Yeah. It frames in the whole message of this, but we are turtles on a post. I mean, we have a microphone and headphones, maybe a few people are listening, but it's a small post, but it's a stewardship. And how do we interact with success? How does, and this could be true for, business people or whatever career you're in, medicine, or, there's always something to ascend. And what do you,
how do you stay average in the journey?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's interesting when you watch The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits continually talk about the Shire.
Yeah.
I just miss the Shire. It's like you're out saving the world, and it's like, I wonder how my garden's doing.
Yeah.
And I think even in that 2 Corinthians 4 where, Paul's talking about being jars of clay, he goes on to talk about, we need to look at not what is seen, but what is unseen. So it's like, what are we focusing on in this journey of life? Mm-hmm. Are we focusing on the outer stuff that's seen, that's celebrated, or, by faith, are we like, I can't wait to be with my King. I can't wait to.
Yes.
That theme in Lord of the Rings. I want to read this quote and just have you interact with it a little bit. This is Samwise Gamgee. Some people say he's like the hero. He might be the hero of the whole thing. Yeah. He's a Frodo who's carrying the ring bearer. It's his buddy, Samwise. And this is the point where he was being tempted by the ring of power at one point. And here's what it says. It says, in that hour of trial, it was the love of his master that helped most to hold him firm. But also deep down in him lived still unconquered his plain hobbit sense. He knew in the core of his heart that he was not large enough to bear such a burden, even if such visions were not a mere cheat to betray him. The one small garden of a free gardener was all his need and due. Not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. And anyway, all these notions are only a trick, he said to himself. Oh. How does that hit you? Explain that. What is it about? He's saying he's looking at the possibility of becoming a great tycoon and commanding other people to work his garden. And he's like, what if one small garden, I just want to be a free gardener and plant my,
I mean, what Paul says in 1 Timothy 6 about, godliness with contentment is good gain. And what Sam's guard against temptation was contentment. I'm happy with my garden. I'm satisfied there. So I'm not I don't need more. And I think in church world or business world or whatever, there's always this, what's next, what's bigger, what's better. And there's just this lack of contentment.
Well, I love the moment where he's like, oh, wait, I don't have even I'm not even hardwired for that. What am I thinking? That just looking in the mirror and realizing, I wasn't even made to be that guy or whatever. So last night we had this home group, and I had made a joke about myself as I'm trying to reach up and get this coffee carafe or whatever, not being the tallest dude in the world. And but later, and I was asking them, so what are the things that kind of are still mysteries to you about Veritas? What are some curiosities about Veritas? You're newer to and the one guy is kind of a playful, fun guy. He goes, I just wonder how a guy so short can be our pastor. And I'm like, wow, I guess. Hey, I can say that.
Right. There's all those height requirements in ministry.
Totally. But I actually, and I got to be honest, there's a little sting. But those are those beautiful moments also where like, dude, you're not that remarkable. Like you're short. Yeah. Okay. Or whatever that is for any one of us, that I welcome those. And those little stings are kind of like, ha ha ha. You're like, oh, no, that's true. Like Samwise, oh no, I wasn't even made to carry the ring. Yeah. I wasn't made to, you know what I mean? And that realization is really healthy for all of us.
It's almost an insult. If you would rather be called an idiot or stupid than to be called average. It's like such an insult to just, you're just average.
Yeah. You're not even exceptional in your stupidity.
Yeah.
Just average.
Yeah. You're just average. I think that's the, cause there is, that's the advantage when you can accept, hey, this is who I am. I'm not a big deal. Mm-hmm. And just to fight that impulse to be great, to be a big deal, which is accepting I'm a little fellow in a wide world. Mm-hmm. And that should be a relief. Right. That's a relief.
And it's such a relief. Like get off the treadmill of trying to impress everybody and just be free in who you are in Christ. So when you wrote this book, what's your hope for the people that read it? Like, what do you, when they put it down after they've read it, what do you hope?
I hope that they walk away in awe of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, he's amazing. That's because that's the thing is there really is only one amazing person in the world, and that person is Jesus. So if that could happen, Austin Claver helped me, by illustrating each chapter with a picture. And one of my proudest teaching moments in all of my teaching was I read the book to these Zambian pastors, and I was teaching, and I read the book to them with just the pictures. I showed them the picture and explained what the picture meant. I'm like, that's what that chapter is about. And but the last picture in the book is a picture of all of these little turtles on posts in the shadow of the cross. Yeah. And that's the summary of the whole book. What's my hope is that we realize we just stay small in the shadow of the cross. And, Psalm 91, 92, it says, whoever dwells in the sacred place of the Most High God will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge. He is my God. And in him will I trust. And so I hope that people will be in greater awe of Jesus. But even as they listen to this podcast, I think that's my hope as well, is that people walk away just encouraged as we just talk about, what God's teaching us. And so, as we kind of wrap it up, did we figure out our elevator pitch yet?
That was a really long elevator. I hope that elevator goes really slow.
I mean, I think when I put down your book, in our world, we feel this draw to be exceptional. I felt a draw, like, I want to be average. I want, like, it's the good life. I want to just have life with friends and campfires and camping trips and ministry that way. So I hope that we shine a light through this podcast of the beauty of the average life.
Jake, you said something that probably I wrote in the book, and again, didn't quote you on it. But you're like, Jesus is not against greatness. Jesus is not against you being great. He's just against your definition of it.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, where he talks about those who want to be great. And he doesn't rebuke the desire to be great. He's like, well, then be a servant. He's like, this is your path to greatness. So we just have to redefine what being great is.
Yep. So hopefully we think Jeff, any closing words?
No, I want to admire kind of in a Hebrews 11 way, where they just go through the remarkable people of faith, all of whom failed to get that aspirational goal at the end of the life. And he's commending them because Hebrews 11:6, it was they're seeking after God. God rewards those who earnestly seek him. That's the thing that he was going to reward. So not that we hit the mark, get the goal, win the prize here on this earth. It's more that we are seeking Christ constantly. And so celebrating even those great leaders who died seeking Christ. You know what I mean? Like they died not having failed or having accomplished and then got caught up in pride and sin or whatever. But those remarkable men and women throughout the ages who sought Christ all their lives and then died. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing on the planet? Not to have achieved, but to just keep striving.
I don't remember the old dead saint that said this, which he would probably be happy about with the quote. But he said, "Preach the gospel, die, be forgotten." He accomplished that because I can't remember his name. So, I mean, in closing, I know our audience for this podcast is probably predominantly our congregations. And we've promoted your book in Veritas. I know you have here, but if anybody hasn't read that, I would urge you to, because it's such the heart of the DNA of the kind of culture we want in our churches. And if you read through that book and be like, oh, I want to embrace the beauty of an average life, that would make our churches so much sweeter. So I agree.
I appreciate that, Jake. Yeah. Well, I think it's a wrap. So
it was a long elevator ride.
Yeah, it was a good.
We're the top floor now.
Yeah. So, well,
it was a grain elevator.
We're in Iowa. We may be in the basement.
That auger went really slow. Sorry, you're trying to wrap up. You do that.
I think that's about it. I think that's enough for this time.
What an average ending.
Yeah, that's great. Well, next time we'll be talking about your book and interacting with that. Excited for that conversation. But thanks for joining us and have a great week.